rakte sati punā rāgaḥ kuta bhaviṣyati sati vāsati rāge rakte samaḥ kramaḥ.
Rakte sati punā rāgaḥ kuta bhaviṣyati sati vāsati rāge rakte samaḥ kramaḥ. MMK chapter 6 verse 2. But when a reddened one is there, how on earth will redness happen? Whether or not there is redness, and whether or not there is a reddened one, this step is the same. This step is the same. So here we have the antidote to all kinds of worry. When I translated this verse a couple of years ago, didn't get the point at all. So I translated kramaḥ as this method of proceeding. See, generally speaking, Buddhist translators are the enemy of the truth, and I include myself in that cohort. And so most people have understood kramaḥ when he says esha kramaḥ, nominative singular masculine. This kramaḥ means step, but it also means a method or a manner, and especially in philosophical discussion, it means a manner, a kind of logical progression. So a manner of proceeding. So I translate this manner of proceeding. Then it suddenly kind of hit me yesterday. Kramaḥ means step. We had it a couple of last chapter or the chapter before. It suddenly hit me that kramaḥ, that I translated as a manner of proceeding in a long-winded way, just means a step, literally. And as often in Shobogenzo, you think in order to sort of convey some complicated understanding of something, you end up sort of fiddling around with a long-winded translation. But if you go back just to the original word, just rely on the dictionary, sometimes the meaning comes out much better. And so it is with kramaḥ. Kramaḥ means a step, and far from meaning a progression, a manner of proceeding, it actually, I think originally, is much better understood as something pointing in the other direction. In other words, the backward step. Because what this verse is about negation of worrying. And worrying is always worrying about the future, isn't it? It's worrying about what's going to happen. Oh, redness might happen. I might go red. Oh dear. So, worry is the wimpish state of thinking something might happen or it might not happen. And so that is how to not go down that path. That's not the right direction to go in, to worry more and more. I mean, if there's a tendency there to worry, as like Marjorie Barlow said, you're an inveterate worrier, aren't you? That can help because at least it helps you stop worrying about being a worrier. You accept, yeah, I have got that tendency. On the level of conventional truth, I am a blusher, a worrier. But what this verse is saying is just get the hell on with it, whether you're a worrier or not a worrier, if you're a blusher or not a blusher, if you're blushing or not blushing, just get the hell on with it. That's the antidote to worrying. In chapter 24, you've got dukkha pariyanta karma, the action, the karma, the pariyanta puts an end, that ends, dukkha, suffering. So action that puts an end to suffering, you just get the hell on with it. So this step is the same. Esha samaḥ kramaḥ. So samaḥ, the same. Esha samaḥ kramaḥ. This step is the same. So it's always the same step. Just bloody get on with it. And this the way Nāgārjuna put it in this verse just reminded me of. Actually, 2 years ago, it somehow reminded me of this verse. But when I reread it again yesterday, so I quoted this 2 years ago when I wrote an introduction to MMK, to this chapter. I wrote an introduction to every chapter, and after 2 years, I don't particularly like any of them, but I'll read out what I wrote 2 years ago in the introduction. It starts with a poem that I wrote in 1987. It's a bit sentimental, but there we are. Nothing to live for, nothing to gain. No love lasts forever, no man is his name. Gold face or red face, we wash them the same. The truth includes blunders, sickness and pain. And then here's my introduction to the words. Rāga, reddening, and rakte, the reddened one, are both from the root rāge, which means to be dyed, to redden, and hence to be moved, excited, or enamoured. Rāga, the act of reddening, also means emotion associated with redness, e.g. passion, love, desire, excitement, lust. If I went slightly red there, it was the blooming cat treading over my plastic roof. That was I don't know if you could hear the noise, but there he is. And not forgetting embarrassment and anger. The past participle rakte, reddened or reddening, describes one affected or liable to be affected with lust, anger, etc. In my ordinary way of thinking, I, being the easily reddened one, rakte, am prone to be affected by undue emotional excitement, rāga, which makes me go red. That was certainly my experience in my teenage years, when I used to suffer on the school bus in the orbit of girls from what I later read had a medical designation, chronic blushing. It was also my experience in my 20s when, in a more reflective moment, I wrote the above verse. So, nothing to live for, nothing to gain. No love lasts forever, no man is his name. Gold face or red face, we wash them the same. So this was in 1987, after I've been student of Kuta Nishijima for 5 years. And the line in that verse, which does have some merit, born of actual practical experience, gold face or red face, we wash them the same. So my experience in my early 20s was, Nishijima Sensei was a celibate monk, living in the balanced state. He seemed to have pretty few worries. He was an elite member of Japanese society. He had plenty of money. He always seemed to be kind of in control and in the zone. So it's fair to say I idealised him quite a lot. So hence the gold face. In Shobogenzo, the 6-foot golden body of Buddha, he's the kind of idealised image of Buddha. And my experience of myself was one of emotional suffering, being separated from a girlfriend in England. My good friend Andrew Wilson, as he said at the time, pointedly, squatting on your best mate's dick. That's the kind of banter from your mates that can help in that situation, actually, cruel though it sounds. Sort of like accepting harsh reality. But anyway, I experienced myself as the red-faced one, and Nishijima Sensei as the gold-faced one. But I was aware that it didn't really make any difference when we were working together, when we were engaged in the same job. it was the same job. So, and if we were practicing together in the temple, we were sitting on the same zazen floor, going into the same bath. So there was nothing. Generally speaking, I would have been prone to try to be too clever if I was writing a poem. But that one expressed actually how it was. Gold face or red face, we washed them the same. Now that is a kind of recognition of never mind if your face is gold or red. There's a job to do. Let's bloody get on with it. Just fucking do it. Actually, that was my slogan to myself while I was translating the Shobogenzo. We just fucking do it. And I in my head, I thought, when we've got the fucking job out of the way, then I'll really be able to devote myself to Zazen. In some ways, the Alexander technique teacher training, he, made that kind of prediction come true, but it wasn't as plain sailing as I imagined it was going to be when I didn't have this terrible burden anymore, because there's always other burdens that one has to deal with. So when a reddened one is there, rakte sati. So that again echoes the two words in the previous verse. Just as rāgo bhavet is repeated in the second line of the first verse, redness might happen. Rakte sati is echoed in the first pada of the second verse, echoes the fourth pada of the first verse. So it's repeated, rakte sati, there being a blusher. But here I've translated, instead of blusher, I've switched to a reddened one, because I want to mirror the sense of redness. So rakte sati, well, also because a reddened one is past participle, and that fits better here. So rakte sati, when a reddened one is there, punā is means, in this case, however, still, again. I've translated but. Rakte sati punā, but when a reddened one is there, how on earth? Kuta eva. So kutaha means from where. So how. Eva, emphatic. Kuta eva, how on earth. Bhaviṣyati, will happen. Third person singular, future of bhu, to be, to exist, to take place, to happen. Rāgaḥ, redness, nominative singular masculine. Rāgaḥ kuta eva bhaviṣyati. How on earth will redness happen? Rakte sati punā rāgaḥ kuta eva bhaviṣyati. But when a reddened one is there, how on earth will redness happen? So what it's saying is, what we worry about is, I'm a blusher, and so I might go red. What he's saying is, look, if you're a blusher, if you're a reddened one, you've already gone red. So what's to worry about? And if you're not a blusher, then you're not going to go red. Then the second line, even sort of just below the level of the words, I know it means the same as gold face or red face, we wash them the same. That's the backward step. Stop bloody worrying. To stop worrying is the backward step. So here it is in Nāgārjuna's words. Sati, there being. So locative of sat, to be. So sati, where there is, or there being. Va, There's two vas, so it means either or whether or not. But no, whether. So sati va, asati va. And va plus asati goes to vāsati. So sati vāsati va. Whether or not there is. Then rāge, locative singular of rāga, redness. So sati vāsati va rāge. Whether or not there is redness. So sati, there being, asati, there not being. Sati in the presence, asati in the absence. So you could translate in the presence or in the absence, either in the presence or in the absence of redness, or whether or not there is redness. Sati vāsati va rāge. Whether or not there is redness. Rakte. So that also means sati va rakte. Whether or not there is a reddened one. Rakte, locative of rakta, the reddened one, the blusher. So sati va rāge, rakte pi. So rakte plus api means and, also. So rakte plus api is rakte pi. Sati va rāge, rakte pi. Whether or not there is redness, and whether or not there is a reddened one. Esha samaḥ kramaḥ. This step is the same. There's a parallel here that just occurred to me right now when I was saying this step is the same, of Marjorie explaining about Alexander directions, which also are an antidote to worry and a way of practicing the backward step, of coming back into your back. That's the phrase that Alexander teachers use. So if you're putting hands on somebody and they've got a terrible problem, and you don't stay back in your back, you'll be pulled down into their problem. So there's a kind of psychophysical response to that, is to stay back in your back. So it doesn't mean to do something physically, but it means in your mind you're not end gaining to solve their problem. You're remembering, you're being mindful that what helps them is you staying open to the possibility of staying still or moving, put it that way. You're keeping your own poise, staying back in your own back. So that's primarily a mental decision. It's a volition, the Buddha's words. But of course it has its physical, it's manifest in your posture, you might say, because an end-gaining, worrying about the person, you tend to contract and be pulled forward towards the target. But if you stay back in your back, there's also, whether it's manifest, whether it's measurable by a ruler, there's a space between you and the person you're trying to help. And that space is not measurable, in fact, because you can be very close to somebody and stay back in your back. And you can also be sort of imitating staying back in your back. And actually, mentally, you're not back in your back at all. So staying back in your back it's the most mental thing there is, in Alexander's words. But it can show itself, in a sense, in how you're moving physically. But I want to emphasize again, because it's revealing. This is something I remember talking about on a training course quite often. When trainee teachers understand the importance of staying back in the back, they're liable to try and turn it into a physical response. So actually keeping space. And in the same way, as I mentioned before, that rather than looking at the person, they sort of look away. That's also alluded to when Nāgārjuna is talking about darshana, looking. So Patrick MacDonald used to say, look the bugger in the eye. You know, you can't stay back in your back and not get drawn to the stimulus by sort of neglecting it and moving away from it. The cat is just slipping down the roof on the ice, the silly thing. So that's what they say in Japan. Even monkeys fall from trees. The agile cat there has just come a cropper. Esha samaḥ kramaḥ. This step is the same. So the step, I'm saying, Alexander directions will take you back into your back. Help you come back to yourself. That's what the directions are for. Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the back lengthen and widen, sending the knees forwards and away, all together, one after the other. So all together, bringing oneself back to the whole body being informed with thought. That's staying back in your back. The whole body being informed with thought. But the point I was getting round to is this step is the same. So head forward and up, back to lengthen and widen, is the same direction, whatever movement you're engaged in, whatever position you're in. So, because it's the most mental thing there is, as I was explaining a few days ago, you could be an actor playing a Hunchback of Notre Dame, you know, really looking like a completely twisted and pulled down posture on the outside, on the surface of it. But if you're an actor who was trained in giving Alexander directions, you can be lengthening and widening, even in the process of showing grief or whatever. You're becoming small and withered with pain and contracting into yourself. Even in that physical movement of contraction, inside you can be growing. That's what directions are about. It's not something you can necessarily see from the outside. And the directions are always the same. So if you can see, my fingers now are pointing upwards, and now they're moving upwards. So the movement of the fingers is up, and they're pointing up. And now the movement of the fingers is downward in space, but they're still pointing up. So pointing up to move up, pointing up to move down. Now, if you understand that, and you stand in front of the chair, you can practice exactly the same thing. Thinking up to get out of the chair. Then if you bend your knees, you think up. Keep bending your knees, and keep thinking up. And your arse touches the chair. So you've now sat in the chair in a totally different way. Because generally what happens is that people stand in front of the chair. They might be thinking up temporarily. Then the teacher says, now sit down. And they point their arse into the chair, and they move down in space and direct everything down towards the chair. That is, generally speaking, what people do when they respond instinctively, unconsciously to the stimulus to sit in the chair. They think, I'm up here, the chair's down there, I want to get my arse down there into the chair. So it becomes a downward contracting. There's no sense of the head going forward. No, it's the head back and down, bump into the chair. So what the Alexander teacher will do, if it's any good, we'll see if this is the head pulling back and down onto the spine. The teacher will release that and help the student understand head forward and up means to release that, to stop pulling the head back and down. And that will continue even in the movement down to the chair. So there's even more space. And then boing, back. So the head leads, the body follows out of the chair. So it's like, instead of sort of usually sort of girding our lines and pushing up so the space is all contracted, it's more space. and opening up and opening up. So it's going up to get out of the chair and keep going up to bend the knees, and you arrive back in the chair, and it's up and up and up. So the direction is always the same. So to put it another way, staying back in your back. If you staying back in the back is a kind of backward direction away from the pupil. So you stay back in your back, and you can move away from the pupil, but you can stay back in your back and get your nose right against the pupil's shoulder, because staying back in your back is not a movement in space, it's a direction. And it's esha, samaḥ, kramaḥ. This step is the same. It's always the same direction. You're always asking for the kind of expansion that will allow your breathing to be freer. So hence the wisdom of the Buddhas. Sabakaya pati samvedi asasi samiti sikkati. One trains oneself with the awareness, the whole body being informed with thought. I will breathe in. It's the intention is to breathe, is to keep breathing. Esha, samaḥ, kramaḥ. This step is the same, because the step is stepping back into emptiness. There's a fucking great dividing line that Nishijima Sensei, in his total ignorance, drew. This is Buddhism, my true Buddhism. And on the other side of that dividing line, there's non-Buddhism. Such an important point. Prapancha. Prapancha means spinning things into self-existence. And in other words, it means creating a dividing line between things which are originally full of each other. So you can only, to draw a dividing line is between self and others, between the blusher and the blushing, between existence and non-existence. That's precisely what the Buddha's teaching is directing us away from. While I'm on the subject, you see, I don't go back and read Shobogenzo because it winds me up. You know, I suppose I'm sequestering myself from redness, but I was motivated to pull this out because there was such a nice explanation of the backward step in it. That was the wisdom that was immune to the stupid thinking about dividing lines. But I thought that the part about the backward step might be in the chapter on action. So I started reading through that and came across to this. Finally, Gautama Buddha realised that in the realm of time, only the present moment was real. He could think about his life stretching from the past and into the future, but he could live only at the moment of the present. This was true not only for himself, but for all people and things. In fact, everything in the universe could exist only at the moment of the present. So Gautama Buddha studied the moment. He studied real time, the time of real existence. He studied his real life as it appeared moment after moment. He found that thinking and feeling took him away from the reality of the moment. In fact, it was only in the midst of activity that the past and future fell away, and the clear state of being in the moment appeared. Clear state of being in the moment appeared? Well, I haven't experienced that so far, so maybe I'm missing a trick. In such a state, he could experience time or existence as it was. What he experienced was simply now, 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 now. Each moment was unique and fully formed. Each moment stood alone in independent dignity, clearly cut from the past, clearly cut from the future. But a moment could never be grasped. It was too short and too fleeting. It was just a flash, an instantaneous flash of something. That instantaneous flash was in fact everything. It was his life. It was the universe itself. So that is a very succinct explanation of Zen realism. And that is precisely what Nāgārjuna is refuting in his exploration of time. So that the real tell is here. Each moment was unique and fully formed. Each moment stood alone in independent dignity, clearly cut from the past, clearly cut from the future. So that is a totally non-empty understanding of time. So, as I've already said, for me, the real tell, that's more philosophical, but we're talking about pratitya, going back. The real tell for me was I understood my teacher's teaching of right posture was false, no doubt about it. And so to unpick the wrong teaching, it's taken me 20 years to get to the real root of it, what it goes back to. And what it goes back to is the same as saying this is the dividing line between Buddhism and non-Buddhism. See, the Buddha called me a non-Buddhist because he actually said it explicitly, having seen that I'd gone to the other side of his dividing line. He called me a non-Buddhist. In his old age, the world was divided into people who accepted his view, who are true Buddhists, and on the other side of the dividing line were the enemy, the non-Buddhists. I mean, he wavered. So sometimes you'd be venerable so-and-so if you agree with him. But then if you disagree with him, he was back to Mr. Mike Cross. I mean, it was useful in a way because observing that, you can see how cults work. And not only observing his deluded, senile behaviour, but what really disgusting was the behaviour of his acolytes, his arse-licking dharma-heirs, who, in the manner of the typical religious idiot, thought that he must be right, and therefore that when he saw people as being on the other side of the dividing line, they were on the other side of the dividing line, which very easily becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you see people as the other side of the line. It's easy to make an enemy of them. Rakte, sati, punā, rāgaḥ, kuta bhaviṣyati. But when a reddened one is there, how on earth will redness happen? Sati, vāsati, rāge, rakte, samaḥ, kramaḥ. Whether or not there is redness, and whether or not there is a reddened one, this step is the same. Gold face or red face, we wash them the same. See, he understood that in practice. That was what it makes so difficult to make sense of the whole thing, because intuitively, Japanese people generally they understand emptiness intuitively. They're not an individualistic, selfish people. So there were many things working in the direction of unselfishness as far as Nishijin Sensei was concerned, not least of which was giving me money every month to support the translation effort. See, Japanese people tend to think of themselves as being like sticky rice, not as individual units, like a potato, but within that, he described himself as ippiki no okami, a lone wolf, and it was a lone wolf with an understanding of time, of the moment being cut off separated with independent dignity. It was a wrong understanding. But in his behaviour, he would tend to transcend his own wrong understanding. Even in his sitting practice, he wouldn't be so stiff when he was sitting. He just imposed his stiffness on mugs like me who believed that he knew what he was talking about. Sati, vāsati, rāge, rakte, samaḥ, kramaḥ. So I didn't mention that you got rakte and api and esha, this, nominative singular masculine, agreeing with kramaḥ. So with Sandy, rakte, api, esha becomes rakte, samaḥ, kramaḥ. While on the subject of the backward step, and in closing this rant, I would like to quote F.M. Alexander from his book Constructive Conscious Control of the Individual, where he talks about the need for unity and simplicity. A state, I would suggest, in which there are no dividing lines. Here's what Alexander has to say. For, as we have already indicated, in the beginning of things there must have been unity, and it was a strange lack of reasoning that permitted man to make a false division in an organism that can only be satisfactorily developed as an indivisible psychophysical unity. In my opinion, we have here the crux of the whole matter, and I venture to predict that before we can unravel the horribly tangled skein of our present existence, we must come to a full stop and return to conscious, simple living, believing in the unity underlying all things, and acting in a practical way in accordance with the laws and principles involved.
rakte sati punā rāgaḥ kuta bhaviṣyati sati vāsati rāge rakte samaḥ kramaḥ.